Hello, my name is Cami Wynn, and this lesson is for week 8, reading comprehension of narrative text. So by the end of this lesson, students should be able to have the ability to ask and answer questions about a story, to fill in a story map, identify the theme of a story, apply a story's theme to real life. Okay. And I'm sorry if I mess up the spider's name because it's kind of a funky name. It's coming from the book Common Sense and Annecy Tale, I think is how it's pronounced. So we'll get started here. Okay, so you want to display the story map on your smartboard here. And you want to tell the students that certain parts of the stories are almost always there. These parts are called story structure elements, and that using a story map when listening or reading to stories will help them focus on story elements and understand and remember the story better. And then you're going to point to the corresponding story map box and explain each of the following elements. So we're going to go over those elements here in a second. Okay, so the first one is setting. So this box is where you print the story setting. The setting of a story is when and where the story takes place. Characters. This box is where you print the names of the characters. Characters are the people, animals, or creatures in a story. And then the plot, and then it'll be a bracket labeled plot. The plot tells what happened, gives a story in the beginning, the middle, and an ending. The bracket also indicates that the plot has 3 parts: a problem, a sequence of events, and an outcome. So let's look at those real quick. A problem, this is the box where you print the character's problem. The main character in a story always has a problem or something that they are wanting to do. A problem usually presented during the beginning of the story and continues throughout the middle of the story. Sequence of events, this box is where you would, these are the things that happen as the character attempts to solve a problem. So they usually happen more in the middle of a story. And the outcome, this is where the story turns out. So it's almost always at the end of the story. It's your ending outcome, essentially. It's the very ending. Then there's also the theme box. And this box is where you print the message the author is wanting the reader to take away from the story. It's the lesson or observation the story is intended to teach. Identifying a theme is like digging for treasure. Sometimes the theme is discovered easily, and other times it is not. After reading the story, we will learn more about identifying the theme. Okay, so you're going to introduce your story now. Before we read, let me share a little background about this folktale. Anansi is a spider and West African folk hero who is known for his cleverness. Anansi loves to plan and scheme, tries to outsmart everyone. Sometimes Anansi comes up with a clever plan to find smart solutions to puzzles problems. Other times he winds up causing a lot of mischief. Okay, and so this is where you will use the story map as you talk through the story and as you read the story. Okay, together we are going to read the Anansi Tale and fill in the story map. I will model asking questions and filling in my story map, and you will record information on your own story map. And the title of the story is Common Sense of an Anansi Tale. Okay. And then you gotta tell the students that as you read the story, they will be looking for the setting, characters, and plot. Explain that story elements won't necessarily appear in order, so they have to be on the lookout. Also remind them that the plot includes the problem, sequence of events, and outcome. Alright, so for character, the title of the story tells us that the story will be about Anansi and Annecy is the main character, so students will write down Annecy. So who is the story about? And they would say Annecy. I'm going to print Annecy's name in the box, label characters, and you should do the same. Okay, so for problem, now we have some information about Annecy's problem. What is the problem that Annecy faces? What is he trying to do? And then they'll come up with something similar to, he has all the common sense in the world so he can be rich. And then we can add this information to our story map. I'm going to print Annecy's problem in the box labeled problem, and you should do the same too, something you would write in the problem box. Alright, and then you're going to continue to read the story, and then you're going to say, so this is the part of the story to tell about things that happens to Annecy as Annecy tries to solve his problem. What is the first thing that Annecy does to solve his problem? And they should say, he starts to collect the common sense in a sack. I am going to print the first thing that Annecy does in the box labeled sequence of events on the story map, and you should do the same. And you're going to do this throughout the whole book. You're going to follow the procedures for, I believe there's 8 paragraphs, so paragraph 4 through 8 is what you need left to cover for this book. Okay, and when you get to paragraph 6, you're going to stop and say, this paragraph tells the story's setting. So where does the story take place? And they will say, the jungle. Do we know when the story takes place? And we would say no, because there is no time limit. The author does not tell us when the story takes place. So we can leave the information out, or we can make our best guess. I'm thinking that if it's a folktale, it's probably from a long, long time ago. So I'm going to put that in my story map, and you can do the same as well. And so everybody should at this point have most of it filled out. Okay. And once you get to paragraph 9, you should start saying, this paragraph names another character in the story. Who is the character? And they would say a small boy. So they would also print the small boy in the character spot. By the time you get to paragraph 13, you should be at the outcome stage. And so this paragraph tells us about the outcome of the story. How does the story turn out? Does the character solve the problem? And at this point, they should be saying, a breeze blows common sense all over the world to share, and Annecy doesn't get rich. Alright, and so at the very end, we should be asking, does this give us any information about the setting? I'm sorry, hold on just a second. Okay, so you need to point out the phrase that it explains why everyone today, and that's when you ask, does this give us an additional information about the setting? And then you say, then that's when you would change it. You would erase the long, long time ago, and what you would do is put something about today in the passage. Okay, so now that you're at the very end of your story and you're working on the theme. So you're going to start out with something like this. Now our story map is complete, except for the theme. Remember how I said finding the theme is sometimes like a treasure hunt. Now I'm going to show you how to identify the theme of the Annecy story by asking and answering 3 questions. What was the outcome of the story, good or bad? And you need to explain why. I'm going to say the outcome was bad because it was bad for Annecy and he was the main character of the story. The reason it was bad is for Annecy is that he wanted to keep all the common sense, but he didn't get rich. The next question is, what lesson does the main character learn? And then to answer this question, I'm going to complete the following sentence. The main character learned that he or she should or shouldn't blank. Here's my complete sentence. So I want to say, Annecy learned that he should not have been so greedy and that he should not have tried to keep all the common sense for himself. The last question is, what lesson did you learn from the story? To answer this question, I'm going to complete the following sentence. We should or shouldn't blank. So here's my complete sentence. We shouldn't be greedy. So the story teaches us a lesson about greed. Someone who is greedy wants to have more of something that is unnecessary or unfair. He ended up losing instead of gaining all the common sense. And this is when you would ask the students, what is the theme? And they would say, to not be greedy or something along those lines. And then as well, you can do the same process, but you can just shorten it into a guided practice. So after students identify the theme, have them transfer and apply the generalized theme to other stories and to real life experiences. Explain how themes can apply to other situations to help them better understand their theme. And you want to say, today we learned about using a story map to show parts of a story, and we learned how to identify the theme of a story. And what is a theme? And students should say, the lesson of a story. And then you want to say, because at this point you should have read Medeiros for the kids. Yeah, for King Midas, sorry. So then at the very end, you need to have them remember that the theme of the story is supposed to help teach us a lesson. One good way to learn a lesson is to think about how it applies or connects to your own life. So students can share examples of how the books could have something to do with their own life. Some students may struggle with their answers in the correct box for where they should go. Once they have their answer, correct them by saying that the definition of that box, and then explain where they should put it along with the correct identification for the correct box. For instructional considerations for this lesson, for my ELL students, I would have an action or a picture to help them remember what each term meant. So like they would have a picture for character, plot, theme, and so on to kind of help them. For special education students, I would have a sheet with the term and meanings listed or taped to their desks, so that way they would be able to have that information in case they weren't quite as focused during the lesson as they would be when reading the book. Or passage, I guess. Next, for talented and gifted students, I would have them work on a harder passage, so it would challenge them to find their terms. I would also maybe challenge them with different kinds of for different themes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because like they say, sometimes themes are kind of hard to find, like a treasure hunt. So I would try to make it a little more difficult for them so they could keep up with everybody else as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this lesson, and thank you for any feedback.